Okay, so I'm gonna show you how to make your ceramic plate. So you're gonna need a piece of clay that's pretty big. It's like maybe about the size of 2 apples put together. You're gonna need some sort of rolling pin, and if you don't have a rolling pin, you can use a jar, like a cylindrical vase or something similar. Now, if you have a wood rolling pin, you don't need to cover it, but since mine is plastic, the clay is gonna stick to it, so I'm gonna put a piece of paper around my rolling pin. So I have a piece of paper, I'm gonna tape it to my rolling pin like that, and then I'm gonna roll the paper around it. So if you're using a glass jar or a glass cylinder vase, you are gonna also have to put paper on there or the clay is going to stick. Okay, so I've got that prepared now. I need that paper plate I gave you in your kit. You need a sponge that's wet. I also have a cup of water in case I need to wet my sponge again. You need a pencil and some sort of knife. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is wedge this clay, which means it's sort of like kneading. So I'm using it just right on my table, so it might stick a little, but it should be okay. But when I roll out what's called a slab, I need to definitely put a piece of paper under it. So what I'm doing is kind of like pushing down and then turning it towards me, and then pushing down and turning it towards me. And that's gonna get some air bubbles, and it's just gonna kind of move the clay into a nice block. Now I need to turn this into essentially a pancake. At school, I would show you guys kind of how to throw it down on the table to get it to flatten, but at home it doesn't really work as nice. So what I'm doing is sort of pinching it into something sort of flat just to get me started. Okay, and then I'm gonna use my rolling pin to make that look better. So I'm gonna do this on paper again so it doesn't stick to the table. And what I wanna do is roll the middle only. So I'm not going off the clay like that. That's what I'm not doing, okay? Because if you do that, the very edges are gonna get really teeny tiny. So I need to make a slab that's basically big enough for that plate. So right now I can see that's not big enough. So I need to get it a little bit wider. So I'm pressing. And again, I'm not going all the way off the clay because otherwise those edges will get super skinny. And it's okay if I have a few little creases from the paper or from my rolling pin. I'm gonna smooth those out later with my sponge. So I want this pretty thin, okay? It's maybe like 1/4 inch thin. You can kind of see that there. I need to make sure this is gonna fit. So it's still not big enough. So I'm gonna stretch it even more in that direction. Let's try now and see if that fits. So I have the plate again upside down. Okay, so now my plate fits on my slab. And so I'm gonna cut it out, but I'm gonna take my pencil first and I'm just gonna trace around the plate on the clay. So I have a good line of where I can cut. So I do that, then I remove my plate, and now I have that line. So if you have a plastic knife or a regular knife, it doesn't have to be sharp, but we do wanna be careful. So I'm cutting it slow. And sometimes it's helpful to sort of switch your angle. So I'm now gonna go in this direction. And then I just have a little bit up here. So I have to sort of finish that off. Okay, so now I've cut it all out. I'm gonna remove the extra clay. And that I'm going to be able to reuse. So right away, I'm gonna put it into a little ball, and I'm gonna add it to my larger clay bag. Again, right away so it doesn't dry out. So I put that in there and close up my clay bag so that I save that for the next project. Okay, so now what I need to do is just smooth this out. So I have my sponge, it's wet, it's not dripping, and I'm gonna use it on the edges. I'm just gonna zoom in a little so you can see what I'm talking about. So that is very rough. So if I kind of use my finger almost like a taco. You can see now that's really smooth, okay? And I'm just gonna zoom back out. So I'm gonna do that all over this whole edge. And you can also do it in the middle as well if you have any creases or anything funny that was happening to your clay. And on the edges too, like the total side. Now this is another good reason why we're doing this on paper, so we can lift this up nice and easily. So I'm gonna lift it up because I need to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna move this up a little, put that down, and I'm gonna do the same thing with these edges. So it's like minimal pressure, but I am using my finger to help things happen. And then again, I'm gonna kind of go in the middle here and see if I can get rid of some of those creases. And one side is gonna be the part of the plate that we're actually gonna see, and the other side is gonna be the back. So if you don't get it perfect, don't worry. Like I have a little crease there, but I'm not gonna worry. So I'm gonna take this off because chances are you'll get a crease when you flip it over, and I can just sort of clean that up a little bit while I'm sort of holding it in a nice pancake. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is use that plate as a mold. Okay, so I'm gonna gently put my clay slab on the plate, okay? And then I'm gonna gently push and turn. Okay, and you want this to be an even little dip, and you might see some fingerprints, but we'll smooth that out with our sponge in a minute. Okay, so I went all the way around, so now you can see my clay is kind of dipping in. And here's where I can clean up anything in the middle and on the edges again. So this paper plate has a lot of paper plates have like a plastic coating. So if you use a paper plate with a plastic coating, your clay is gonna stick to it. But this paper plate does not have any plastic on it, so it won't stick, which is great. All right, so this looks wonderful. Once I'm done and I have my slab in there, I'm gonna let it dry, just like this with the plate, okay? So I'm just gonna let that dry. Clean up everything else, you know, clean all of the clay off of my sponge, all the clay off of my knife. Maybe keep this pencil with your other tools, you might use it later. And then you'll be ready for the next step.